Third point, warmth. And I'm going to relate warmth to civility. I saw in your strategic plan about making this a warm and welcoming community, and I've certainly experienced that in several hours that I've been here. But it's easy for me to experience that because I'm the speaker. And I say that with seriousness because I do speak in shuls around the country, synagogues around the country, and I've noticed the phenomenon that now I bring to people's attention. I go to a service on Friday night. If I'm lucky, someone says Shabbat Shalom to me in the courtroom. When I finish speaking on Shabbat and I give my sermon, dozens of people are happy to talk to me about whatever topic. They're speaking to me because I'm the speaker. But they should be speaking to me when I'm the stranger, because that's what it means to be Jewish. It means hachnasat orchim. It means caring profoundly about those who are not in our inner circles. Caring profoundly about those who perhaps don't feel as comfortable as we do in Rome with the Jewish institutions, Jewish families, people who aren't in nuclear Jewish families, who feel marginalized in the Jewish community. People I have in class, adults who come up to me and said, I've gone to 4 synagogues and hardly a person has said hello. I find that embarrassing. I find that embarrassing, and I don't want to read on a paper we're a warm and welcoming community. Every community says that about itself. But if someone from the outside visited your community, would they read this and say, that's St. Louis? I've actually been doing a little challenge in the federations in which I speak. I said, imagine that U.S. News and World Report did a new issue called the 50 Best Places in America for Jews to Live. By the way, it could happen. They have the 50 best rabbis. I was actually at a conference with rabbis when that list came out. Oh, it's such a silly list. So, thank God I'm not a rabbi. I don't have to worry about this. So I say, imagine that your community was ranked #1 in America for Jewish people to live. And that's not because one institution that you happen to be on the board of is doing well. That's because we're not thinking territorially about our institutions. We're thinking about community with a large C. We're thinking about what it means to have great social services, great educational services, inspiring synagogue services, a genuinely welcoming and warm invitation. But we are not there yet. I don't know if you're there, but I want to give you that challenge, because I'd love to see every federation in the country vying for that position, #1. And one of the ways we get there, in terms of being a warm and welcoming community, is we're more civil to each other. The lay-professional relationship is suffering. It's suffering from levels of entitlement and incivility. And I can't tell you the number of professionals who've spoken to me in the past 2 years about egregious and adversarial conversations they've had with people they serve. And they're doing this. They've sacrificed a great deal to work in our community. I say this to you because I think it's a crisis, an unspoken crisis, that we're sometimes not prepared to look at. And we have to be a little humble. Frank Walls, the businessman, the mega businessman who died in a plane crash, found a note in his wallet. It said, humility is the ultimate achievement. And that's something to think about in our professional and lay partnerships, is that inclusive civility, that sense of partnering in a genuine and authentic way, of recognizing the humanity of the other. That's something that's hard to find, and I can give you countless examples. The fourth is vision. And I'm not going to say we need more leaders, because everyone has that conversation with everybody. We need better leadership, we need more leaders. We need people who are genuinely innovative. Not saying we're thinking that things should be different or using the lip service of innovation, but genuinely being visionary. John Cotter writes a great deal about leadership, wrote a book called What Leaders Do. And he has an article about, in his article, What Leaders Do, that's in the book. He talks about the difference between leaders and managers. Managers cover day-to-day operations. Leaders have to make sure that future strategic moves will be taken to push an accelerating institution into uncharted territory. Someone explained it in education this way. Principal, make sure that a building is open every day. Headmaster, make sure it's open in 5 years' time. I believe that in the Jewish community today, we have Jewish managers more than we have Jewish leaders. We call them Jewish leaders because it's a lot sexier to say that I'm in a young leadership program than I'm in a young management program. But very often, we're asking our quote-unquote leadership to operate within managerial framework. Keep everything pretty much the same as it's always been. And what will be the big vision? We'll grow our annual campaign incrementally. That's not a big enough vision. That's not a big enough dream. Jeffrey Swartz is a friend of mine, he's the CEO of Timberland. He said, I get so bothered when a Jewish organization asks me for money because they want to recruit 200 new members or they want to grow their campaign by $1 million. He said, I get excited by great, big, ambitious goals. Like when someone comes to me to ask for money because he wants to change 20 blocks of Harlem. That's what a visionary does. That's the way a visionary thinks. And I think we have to have a candid conversation with ourselves. If we're Jewish managers or we're Jewish leaders, and not the same thing. The last is literacy. It's hard to answer the question, why we're Jewish, if we don't feel literate and confident in our own tradition. If we don't know the difference between a Mishnah and Maimonides, or who Ben Gurion was, or any details about the founding of the state. We don't know Hebrew. And this has become accepted in American Jewish life, that you can rise to the highest ranks of a Jewish organization and feel like an infant within your own tradition. The students that I have who do 2-year transformative programs, such as Melton and Mayo and other programs of the like, always say to me afterwards, I thought I was confidently Jewish until I finished this program. And now a world, a universe has opened up to me that I didn't see before. And I feel that I can walk more proudly and more knowledgeably. And that's a goal. That's a high bar that we should set for every Jewish leader. That's because to be a leader isn't to close a pledge card. To be a leader, to be a visionary, to be relevant, to be warm, means to be able to tell the master story, the master narrative of the Jewish people with the kind of inspiration that makes people say, I'm in. This is what I want to do. Not because my grandparents did it, or I'm obligated, or I feel guilty, but because I feel powerfully inspired by these people, by these goals, by the mission of this institution, by what we're able to build together. You meet people like this, the master storytellers. They're not saying to you, can you give me another $5,000 this year? They're telling you why their kid's day school is the best school that any kid could possibly want to go to. They're telling you that their synagogue has given them a moment of transcendence and created a milestone event in their lives that was highly significant and memorable. That's the story. And so I leave you with the task of being the kind of leaders who inspire, because you are inspired, powerfully inspired, by the majestic story, the 4,000-year-old journey of the Jewish people that right now is here in St. Louis. And I want to close, because we opened with Rabbi Koch, I want to close with a thought of his, from Or HaTeshuvah, his guide, The Lights of Repentance, his book on repentance. He says the following thing in the opening chapter 7. It is the nature of repentance, of tshuva, to give to a person peace and oppressiveness of mind at the same time. Think about that for a second. Think about that in your synagogue services, when you read the story of Jonah, that somehow peace and oppressiveness of mind, two contradictory things, can dialectically stay in relationship to each other in something called repentance. When we're self-critical, when we're humble, when we're thoughtful, when we're introspective and reflective and contemplative, we begin a process that's difficult. We begin a process that tells us we need to question some of our assumptions, the way we've been behaving in certain relationships, the way that we've treated certain people, and it makes us uncomfortable. But I don't believe that any growth happens without discomfort. Discomfort is a necessary ingredient for growth, and growth ultimately leads to inner peace. And that's what we pray for in Yom Kippur. We do a lot of things to make us feel uncomfortable. We don't eat. We don't dress the same way that we normally would. Many of us spend hours in the synagogue service. I recommend no spiritual word of that. We experience oppressiveness, some sense of oppressiveness, because at the end of the day, if we've done our job right, if we've thought and constructed goals for ourselves, we've achieved inner peace. What should we feel at Ne'ilah time, just as the sun is setting? We feel tired. We feel hungry. We feel relieved that it's almost over. We're thinking about what we have to make for breakfast. But ultimately, if we believe that we've been forgiven, that we've created this Shana Tova, this year of possibility and growth and learning and innovation, then we achieve inner peace. We feel loved, and because we feel powerfully loved and forgiven and new and that everything is possible, we're able to transmit that sense of inspiration and love to others. And that is the hope that I leave you with, that you will come to the end of Yom Kippur, which is the beginning of our new year of activity as a federation, with a sense of the loving, forgiving, expansive possibility of promise that turns itself into the inspiration that we need to be leaders who can tell a majestic story. Shana Tova.